Well, welcome to the Christian Capitalist podcast. Ken, I'm so glad to see you today. Thank you for joining us here on the show and bringing us some inspiration from Colorado. How are you doing today?
Doing fantastic. A
Good.
little light on sleep with the newborn, but really grateful to
Well,
be here.
I appreciate you joining us, especially after a light sleep evening. Tell us a little bit about your family and where you're from.
Yeah, grew up in Colorado, and I'm married to Megan. We've been married for 13 years. My bride, and together we've had four kids. Our oldest is 8. Our youngest is 4 months, and um, we we lived in Costa Rica for a little bit, for a year, doing some missional work while running my company. But most of our time together has always been back in Colorado.
In
So we're
Colorado. And where are you in Colorado?
we're just south of Denver, in near Lone Tree.
Okay. And so
Yeah.
for those, because we got folks listening to the podcast from all over America, for folks who haven't been to Colorado or to Lone Tree, our big question sitting here as we record this on January 10th is, do you have snow?
We do,
All
we
right.
do, and it's freezing. It's 14 degrees today. So
Good grief.
yeah, yeah, it's not. Colorado winters used to be. I was born here, and what I remember is we'd get a big snow, and then 2 days later it'd be 50, 60 degrees, and all the snow would go away. And I feel like our winters in the last 4 years have been really persistent. Not a lot of warm days. So it's been around 20 for the last 4 days, and just not as pleasant as the variable weather Colorado used to have.
My wife Rebecca is from Mississippi, and as you know, we now live in Destin, Florida. Not as pleasant. I think it's a very, very calm way of saying that. I think it would be miserable for her. Hey,
Yeah.
so we also have a bunch of parents who listen to the podcast. What's it like to live in 20-degree weather with snow on the ground when you have kids that are infant to 8 years old? Y'all just have them play inside a lot, or you bundle them up?
No, we try to get them outside. I'm a huge fan of. Uh, there's a great book Joe DeSena wrote called Resilient Families, but the idea of really giving our children opportunity to understand how strong they are, and so I'm pretty. I have lots of invitations to get outside, to do the hard thing. I got my 8-year-old daughter. I take a cold shower every day, amongst many other things that are uncomfortable, you could say. And my 8-year-old daughter, I've got her where she's willing and inspired to do it on her own. So she'll take a cold shower by herself, like maybe once a month. And so try to get them outside in the cold. Try to encourage them that it's okay. Like it's going to be good. So we try to be outside as much as possible.
That's great. All right. I remember, I think you and I talked about this a little bit when we were getting ready for the show. My dad was career Air Force, and we were stationed at Lowry Air Force Base, which I think is now closed, in Aurora, Colorado, in the early 70s when I was a real young guy. Both of my parents are from Montgomery, Alabama. And so they had no preparation, no experience, nothing to prepare them for Denver winter. And I remember my
Yeah.
mother to this day saying, I couldn't send you outside. I knew you were going to freeze to death. Like, apparently you can send a 3-year-old outside as long as they have the right training, right?
You can with some right clothes, but coming from Mississippi and the South would be tough.
It would be tough. Exactly. Well, so, man, I'm so glad to get a chance to talk with you today. Tell us a little bit about your business and what God called you to do on the corporate side to enable the ministries that you've undertaken.
Yeah. So I'm the CEO of Never Settle, and we're a marketing agency. And in short, we help businesses grow through branding, design, web development, marketing, and advertising. And that's what we do every day. But God put on my heart that at a foundational level, when I started the business, that we would integrate biblical principles and biblical authority into our operating agreement. And one of those things would be generosity. That's one of our core values. And then tithing, even Sabbaths. Those are two outside the norm things that I
Yeah.
would say you would find in just the way that we run the business. And that goes all the way into our legal structure and how it flows into our operating agreement.
That's awesome. Like you and I have talked about before, the motto of the Christian capitalist is the more we make, the more we give. I think that's fantastic that y'all had the notion to kind of hardwire it into the corporate structure of the company. What do you think? What do you think led God to putting that on your heart? What basis did you have, or experience did you have that maybe led you into that framework?
Yeah, I think it's probably my own journey in tithing, you know?
Mhm.
So I started in management consulting, and then I was in tech startup in Silicon Valley. And um, around 2009, we had this huge explosion of customers revenue. We hit the kind of like the hockey stick curve,
Yeah.
and then the market dumped with the housing market crash, and we lost all of our big clients. And through a series of things, I went through a handful of different hard things back to back. Um, and the short story is I lost everything. So
Oh,
the company closed. I was for something I for a mistake I'd made a long time ago. I was living in Canada, and I was studying my GMAT. I was really hoping I could get into Harvard, and I was in Whistler and skiing and studying and all this stuff, and I ended up getting deported from the country. I lost everything I owned, and I moved back into my parents' basement,
oh,
and I
brother.
was 27, and
Ken, that's terrible. I mean, literally, that's a cliche.
yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah. And when I say lost everything, I mean like everything I physically owned was stuck in Canada. My company shut down. Like everything went away quickly. And do you like pie? You a pie guy?
absolutely. Ken,
Yeah.
we haven't met in person yet, but yes, I think it's safe to say for all of those who are watching us on our YouTube channel, yeah, that guy likes pie and cake.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. You ever had humble pie?
Just about
So
every day, but it sounds like
okay.
a big piece of it in Canada, huh?
Yeah. So I'm in my mom's basement, and in high school I had three jobs at once. Always kind of provided for myself. Some of that was a false facade of feeling self-made, but um, at 18 went to college and then never looked back, and just a high producer. And I'm here in my mom's basement, and I'm just eating big spoonfuls of humble pie every day. And in that, I am hit some real deep levels of depression and some other things, and I feel like I had a path of like I can go after God as hard as I can, or I can go after the world. But like I am broken and hurting and empty. And so I already knew Jesus. I'd been walking with him for a long time. I'd been tithing a bit, but in that place of being unemployed, living in mom's basement, I got really involved with my church. But one of the things I did as a physical action is I started to tithe. And I tithed, and at that point I was making very little money because I was on unemployment, and I tithed a huge percentage of what, like, more on a percentages basis, more than I've ever tithed in my life, and I gave it away. And what I found was, um, I think there's two things that most people think of when they think of giving, which are great, and there's this third piece that's really changed my life. And the first two that I see are um, obedience. Like the father says to do it, so like we should do it, like
Yeah.
that, like we know that it's good because he's asked us to do it, and he's a good father. So that's the first thing. The second thing is being generous and helping others is always a good thing, right? So both of those, I think, are low hanging fruit that people think about when they're tithing. The third thing that I found in my experience when I was at my worst financial position ever, giving more than I've ever given. So I was at these like two paradigms, like as 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 an adult, poor as I've ever been, and then also giving more than I'd ever given. Um, what I found is the physical act of choosing to give my not my like and that's the problem. It's not my money; it's his.
Right.
The physical act of giving what he's given me back into his kingdom did a couple things. It declared to the spiritual world that my hope and my provision is in the King. Like it's all in Jesus. Like it's not because I'm going to work harder and I'm going to make it. So that was the first thing. So in a very spiritual level, I think it's a massive declaration or an assault on the enemy to say, actually, no, my provision comes from the King. The second thing is it's declaring to myself, like it's a reminder to myself, like I don't provide for myself. And one of the things that shifted is even in a time of massive turmoil, I probably had the deepest peace
Mm-hmm.
financially than I'd ever had.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like the gift of giving gave me peace about financial troubles that wasn't there because I was reminding myself and the spiritual world every day, like it's I'm not gonna make it because I work harder or because I'm better. Like it's because he's gonna provide and he'll take care of me. So I feel like tithing was this like direct assault into the um, self production, self care, self. I don't have the right word here, but like taking care of myself, like all those things that can kind of lead me astray. I feel like it was a direct assault into that. So
Sure.
to
This
bring
notion that you're self-reliant
yes,
and self-sustaining when it's really God that is sustaining us, and God is who we rely upon. Let
yeah,
me ask you a question, Ken, along that line. One of the theories or the, I guess, contentions of the Christian capitalist is that that peace, which surpasses all understanding, comes to us from God because we're made in his image. We're made in his image to work hard. And I love hearing that you, as a high schooler, had 3 jobs. We're made in his image to give. Even in your mom's basement, you're still inclined to give because he made us to do those things that we know he does to perfection. What do you think about that? You and I haven't really had a chance to explore that before.
yeah. It reminds me of the parallel of the importance of tithing and Sabbath. So into his image, he rested on the seventh day. He set that example for us, right? And I would say both tithing and Sabbath are principles that the church is is wrestling with. Some people saying like this is an optional thing. Some people saying no, it's not. And I'm not one to make a decision for other people. But what I would say is I feel like he modeled it, right? So even tithing with Abraham and Melchizedek, all the way back to the beginning to then even Jesus speaking about it. But in the beginning, the Father rested on the seventh day, and we were made in His image, so we were not made to work consistently. And how this like laces in together for me with tithing is Sabbath is the same thing. When I choose, especially as a businessman or a businesswoman, where the demands are so high and the temptation to work harder to gain more, even for a good purpose, work harder so I can give more away, right? The Christian capitalist, like
Right.
when I take 24 hours every week and I say I will not work, I'm making a declaration to the spiritual world and to myself that my provision is not my own, right? And so I absolutely believe that we were made in His image, and I believe that He was more than generous. He gave His Son so that I could live, right? So I believe absolutely that tithing is a principle of following the model that He set for us.
And I love the connection to the Sabbath. So let me tell you a quick story and then ask you a question. As you know, I'm a retired attorney, and in particular in healthcare. I was speaking to a group of my peers at Georgia Academy of Healthcare Attorneys a few years ago, and we were talking about work-life balance. And so I asked this group of 100 of my peers, some who worked in law firms like me, some who worked for hospitals in and around Georgia, and said, okay, how many of y'all work on Sundays? All right. And in a group of 100 people, lawyers who are very, kind of driven, probably 10% raised their hand. All right.
Wow.
I know, exactly. And I was like, all right, I feel like this is low. How many of y'all check emails and answer phone calls on Sunday? Everybody raised their hand.
Yeah,
I'm like, come on, guys, we got to dial that back because when you're checking email and returning voicemails, you're still working. So my
for
question
sure.
to you is, when you're in management consulting first, now you have this marketing, advertising, and sounds like very robust, very busy business. What does it mean to you to not work on the Sabbath? What does that look like for our listeners so they can kind of visualize that for themselves in their own industry?
Yeah. So I didn't always do this. So management consulting, Silicon Valley, 7 days a week, always on.
Right.
Part of building Never Settle was what does it look like to build a business on biblical principles. So this is 13 years new for me, if you will. But for me, and me and my wife talk about this a lot. She's a writer, and for me, it's non-income producing activities, and it's a conversation with with Jesus. Like, what does this look like, right? Because I think that's one of the gifts of He's given us so many principles, or teachings to follow, but a lot, like, we avoid them, but they're actually there's pretty wide boundaries around it, and then man over time has always tried to like define it, right? So
Right.
early um, the early Jewish people would say, well, how do we define work? Well, it's this many steps away from your house, you know. And he didn't say that. He just said, don't work.
Right.
And so what it does is it invites us into relationship to have a conversation with him of what does not working look like, right? Because I think it's different for everybody. So I don't have, speaking lawyer terms, like bright lines. My only bright line is non-income producing activity. So, um, for me, it's good for me to be away from my computer,
Hmm.
um, most days. But sometime maybe I do a Bible study and I'm on my computer. So it's like the computer's not bad. Email is not necessarily bad, right? But if it's anything to do with my work, it's a complete like dead zone. So yes, no calls, no emails,
Good.
no Slack, no work at all in that regard. And I think the deeper I can even move into true rest, the more of a blessing it is for me. And that's the most profound piece about both tithing and Sabbath, are they are an incredible blessing to us,
Yeah.
and something that I've seen myself buck, and I don't know why, because it's such a gift.
Well, exactly. Isn't that funny that there, especially in modern times when we have these computers, we have these mobile devices, and the internet that allows us to be so productive and efficient when it comes to generating income, but we look at that almost as a burden to take the day off. A burden to say, "Hey, I'm going to shut down." And certainly, I'm curious about this as you bring new people in to never settle and kind of have this as part of your culture, folks who kind of shun not working 7 days a week.
Yeah.
So have you had, as the CEO, have you had experience with folks saying, "Well, no, wait a second, Sunday's my day to catch up on email," or something like that?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, in our employment contracts, we just ask people to not work for 24 hours. And we just go kind of the traditional, the original calendar. So just sundown Friday night to sundown Saturday night.
Okay.
And we just set those 24 hours apart. And we ask people, we can't control what people do. So we're like, if you want to work, you can. But as a company, we're going to shut down for this period of time. And we just ask that you do nothing related to Never Settle during that time. Um, and a lot of people are like, great. And we try not to have people work on weekends in general. So, for at least 48 hours,
Right.
but we really set that time apart and we put it into their employment contracts. And, um, most people love it. We have had people that, um, said, well, that's not, like, why I can be more productive then. I want to do this. I would rather take that time and use it for my family vacation. And it's like, I totally understand. And for us as a company, like, this is almost everything we do is to benefit our staff. Like, that's part of what I see as a Christian capitalist. Like, when you talk about that, is how do we really leverage the resources and things we have to make a difference in our actual team's lives, and then hopefully that flows out, and then we do things that flow into churches and other things. But, like, how do we start with our people, like the people, like our neighbor, the people closest
Right.
to us?
Your neighbor is your coworker right off the bat.
Yeah. So everything we do, almost everything we do, is really geared towards benefiting our team. Sabbath is the one where it's like, it's just about honoring the Lord.
Hmm.
And so, and there is a benefit to our team, but the number one priority isn't time off for the team. It's first to honor them. If it was, then we just say, yeah, take that time and do whatever you want, stack it all up and use it 52
Right.
days
Right.
at the end of the year. Right. So,
Right.
um, yeah, I think most people really appreciate it, and it sets a tone for how we operate. Um, and we've definitely had I've had some pushback on it.
That's funny. And so you mentioned the core values, including generosity, as well as this notion of taking time off. What does that look like? First of all, how do you express your core values in your company? What does that message look like within the company, within the team, and to your customers? Let's just talk about that. Just how you describe your core values, signs on the wall, that kind of thing.
Yeah, we are a remote company, so we have an intranet, and that they're published there, so everybody can see. And um, we try to make decisions based on our core values, and so keeping them in front of people through creative ways versus just saying these are our core values, right? So, and then one of the really impactful ways is our biannual reviews. We do a rating on how each person is exemplifying that core value.
Wow. Okay.
And all of our core values are virtues. So, other people's might, like, some companies are like profitability or whatever it is. They're more tied to physical things. Ours are 100% of them are virtues, meaning a way of being, right? So generosity is a virtue. So we want our folks to live a virtuous life, and if we can be a virtuous company, like if we can start by living a bigger store personally, we can help our clients build bigger stories, because our whole business is helping empower and grow businesses.
Mhm.
So that's how we keep them in front of people. We make decisions if we're going to say yes to a product, or say yes or no to a person or a client or a project, whatever that may be. We try to use those as the sifting filters for, is this going to be right for us? So that's how we use our core values.
Mhm.
We don't tell our clients our core values, so we don't put that in front of them,
Mhm.
but we want to live it out. I would say one of our core values is transparency, and so I can jump the gun and just share a bunch of stuff. Like I'm happy to share where we're really good, where we're not, even mistakes we've made. And I'll just let people know, like, hey, I know I'm sharing a lot with you, but just one of our core values is transparency. And so you're always going to get that from me. So that's probably one that I share with clients. But other than that, our clients don't know about it.
Isn't that interesting? All right, so let's pretend that I'm an employee at Never Settle, and it's my biannual review. How, with generosity as a core value, how
Yeah.
would you be talking to me about that?
This is really interesting because we just did our reviews, and it's the hardest one to measure. Um, this year was hard. I feel like previously it was just like, is our team, are they giving of their time, their energy, their love, their availability to their coworkers, and sometimes our clients. And this year when I was going through it, I was like, I don't know if that's the right way to like, I too much actually could not be helpful.
Yeah.
And so, one, I'll just start our review scale on those particular, our core values, is just, it's 1, 2, or 3. It's a 3-star rating.
Okay.
And it make you make a really good decision. Like 5 stars, 10 stars makes it too muddy. Everything's a 7, everything's a 4-star, right? And then it's like, what does that mean?
Right.
So 1 is like needs improvement, like big improvement. 2 is meeting expectations, and 3 is exceeding expectations. And
Okay.
it's hard, right? Because everybody's always a 2.5, or they're a 1.5. It's
Right.
really difficult. That forces action and a conversation. But what I found is, um, as an example, with one of my teammates who was a 2 out of 3 on this, he he was super generous with his time, his energy, his love, but so much so that he was missing some of his core deliverables, and the things that he's even defined in his own work path, like his own work plan of where he wants to go.
Mm-hmm.
And he's allowed other people's emergencies to constitute emergency on his part. And then what happens is, like, there's a cascading effect that's actually negative for him and for the business.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that one's really hard to rate, but I don't know if that fully answers your
No,
question.
it
But
does.
looking at those metrics, and there is a, financially, which I can't get in. It's probably not even legal to ask my employees what they give, right?
They give it
So
away. Right. Well, that's
the
what I was
girls,
going to ask. Do you ask people to produce receipts?
yeah, yeah.
Right.
The Lord. This is one thing He says, testament. So I believe you probably could never give too much financially. I don't know. I actually just read another book that was, um, talking about a family who like put themselves in a really bad place and lost everything. But that's probably not for right now. But I think giving has probably the highest threshold. But
Mhm.
I think in financially, but I think time is a really interesting one, because if I give, say my team's going through something really hard and I work 80-hour weeks and I leave my wife and my children behind, like that's not the right,
Right.
balance of that, right?
Right. That's exactly right. Or even more basic, as a business owner, with you as a business owner, you know as well as I do, you could be a widget maker. Really doesn't matter if you spend too much time working on staff issues and not on delivering the widgets and making the widgets. You're not going to have a productive company. You're right. You're not
Yeah.
accomplishing your mission.
Yep.
I want to hang on to that book that you just mentioned, that you just read about giving away too much, and because this is one of the core concepts of the Christian capitalist, that
Yep.
you do want to give away. The more you make, the more you give, but you also have to be self-sustaining. And not in a way like we talked about earlier. It's God that sustains us. But if God gives you all these blessings and then you give every single bit of it away, you're not loving your neighbor because you're becoming a burden on your neighbor. So I want to rewind the tape. I'm an old man, right?
Yeah.
Rewind the tape to
Yeah.
when you're back there on unemployment in your mom's basement.
Okay.
And to me, having not known that story before 30 minutes ago, the leap of faith that you took to give generously and the peace that came to you from that. Did it ever occur to you, hey, I better not do this because if I give it away, I won't be able to use it? Or was your faith kind of enabling you to make that generous gift at the time?
I I believe I absolutely had doubts or concerns, but they didn't stick around, right? That was the piece that came.
Yeah.
And I would also say, and I've had so much brokenness in my life. I made a ton of mistakes, and hard things can make you really hungry for God's presence, right? And for Him to show up. And so they have a way of curating faith,
Yeah. Yeah.
growing faith muscles. So I would say I was pretty rooted in trust, in that if I like, even if I lost everything, like it was still okay. Like he was gonna like take, like it wasn't meant to be, almost,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
so
just like the sparrows, Jesus says, "Look at the sparrows. God takes care of them. How much more will He take care of you?" You know.
yeah, yeah. But I never gave to a point where I couldn't provide for myself, if that makes sense. Like I
It
still
does make
ate.
sense, and
I had a I had a roof over my head because I was living under my parents' house, uh, literally, and so it wasn't like I didn't put myself in a bad position. I wasn't married. I didn't have kids. Um, but yeah.
Let's talk about giving in kids. That's a nice segue. One of our guests early on, Jeff Taylor, who's an accountant in Atlanta, talked about how his parents raised him to give, and that he remembers from a very early age, as early as 5, giving,
Mm.
and kind of developing what he described as muscle memory in that regard. What I recall, maybe it was me, but when you were talking about faith muscles, our parents who listen to this podcast are always asking, well, how do I help my kids learn to give? And Rebecca and I are parents now of kids who are almost all in their 20s, and we still struggle with that. How do we encourage our kids to give more? What's that look like for you and your wife as y'all raise your daughters?
We, um, I try to expose my kids to what we're doing and why we're doing it. And when we choose to give to different things on a limited basis, because part of my um, something I try to walk out, and again, all these things are works in progress, but it's like not letting the left hand know what the right hand's doing. So there's just a certain amount of giving that my wife knows this, that she doesn't know, and
Oh,
then
okay.
because of that, my kids don't know, right? And
Yeah.
there's things where um, I don't get a ton of cash these days, but if I get cash or something, there's just ways for me to give that away, and not to talk about it, and there's certain ways to that I write checks to things, and I oversee all our finances as well. So there's certain things that she just doesn't know about. And so there's certain things I don't tell my kids about, but there are other things where I invite them and explain why we're doing it. And I don't know how that's going to impact them long term. I do think that something that I do that I think is more impactful to them is we talk about generosity and the radical blessings we have, but and I haven't done this in a while, so it's a good reminder for me. But on a frequent basis, I would ask our kids to go find what their favorite toy is, and then I'd say, okay, that's the one we're going to give away. Like,
Woo!
would you be willing to give that away? Because like you've been given so much.
Yeah.
Like, but my favorite one, I was like, I like the best. Like we want to give the best. Like how awesome would it be to bless somebody that has no toys or very little toys, for them to get this like clean new whatever it is. And our kids don't have a ton of toys, but like whatever it is, right?
Right.
For them to get that versus this like old beaten up, ragged doll or something like
Right.
that. So I think that's probably more generosity, but I hope it translates into tithing.
That's so interesting because that really is at a childlike level. That's exactly what the story of the widow's mite is all about, right? Jesus praises the widow for giving these 2 coins, which together aren't even worth a penny, because that's all she had. And if you're a
Yeah.
kid, I mean, what do you have? You got toys, right? And take your best one and give it. Oh, that's
Yeah.
awesome! I love that. I love that. Hey, let me ask you, getting kind of flipping back to the business side. Because I should have asked that at the very outset of our discussion today. What led you to name the business Never Settle?
Yeah. It came from the previous cultures I had been in, which were really amazing on many levels and not so amazing on other levels. And so we'll just call it management consulting and Silicon Valley high growth tech startups.
Mm-hmm.
And when I left, I started Never Settle. I'd come out of another tech startup where the founder was doing some things that I disagreed with on an ethical basis. It was legal, but I didn't believe we were treating people and finances correctly. So I ended up resigning and walked away. And when I decided to launch Never Settle, I wanted to build a company based on biblical values. And I remember reaching out to one of my mentors and very, very successful uh, businessman, like net worth close to $1 billion, and
Whoa.
telling him, "Hey, I'm going to launch this company, and I'm going to build it on all this stuff." And he's not a believer, wasn't a believer. I don't know right now. And um, and he said, "Ken, that's really nice." And what I'm getting ready to tell you is what I got from all the people I reached out to. Everyone I told, I'm going to build this business on these values. And it's like, that's really nice, but the business world's going to eat you up. You'll never, like, it'll never succeed. Like,
Wow.
that's cute, that's nice. I know your heart's good, but this won't work. And so as I was going through it, I was presenting to other people, and I had a good friend. His name's Will Feldman, and we actually had worked together. And in my going back to my Hotmail days, my signature line always said "Never settle." So I was like, "Ken, never settle." It was like a life mantra that I had developed, and I think it was really from my father, who had always told me I could do anything in life. And me and his relationship was really broken for a lot of things. That's one thing he instilled in me, was that I could do anything. And somewhere along the line in high school, I picked up this like life mantra of "Never settle." It was like in my signature line, and I'm talking to my friend, like maybe one of the only ones that's supporting me to do this, to launch a business. And I'm telling him what I'm going to do. And I was like, we don't like, and I don't think I used the word settle, but basically I was communicating like, we want to build a business that's unwilling to settle on biblical principles and still be for profit. And he goes, "Bro, it's in your signature line. Look at it." He goes, that's the name. That's who you are. That's the company. Right. And so that's how we got the name.
Isn't that awesome? Yeah, I got to tell you, 2 things. The first, as a lawyer who also trained as a mediator for
Okay.
disputes, Never Settle is not a company name you want to have for a mediation agency, right?
Yeah.
You never settle.
Yeah.
So I love that story though, because my favorite verse from Scripture is Philippians 4:13, and I know it's T-shirts, it's mugs, bumper stickers. Everybody loves this, who's kind of driven in the way that you and I are to start a business in the first place. But I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. and putting that in terms of I'm not going to compromise on the way that I strive to do those things that Christ has sent me to do is just magnificent. I love it.
Yeah.
Do you when you let's talk about how that informs your core values. When you bring folks onto the team, do you talk about that story and what never settle means?
With most people, probably. I definitely talk about the reason I'm hesitating. I probably don't give them the genesis story of how we named the company,
Yeah.
but absolutely let them know what the company's formed on. And that conversation, it just has to come up because I'm talking to them about, hey, we take Sabbath as a company, and
Mm-hmm.
some of these other, we don't let our employees work more than 40 hours a week. And that's not because I'm against 40 hours a week. I actually think God intended us to work 6 days a week, sun up to sundown. But if people dedicate more of their personal time to never settle than 40 hours a week, I think it starts encroaching on their family, the ways that they want to be involved in their community, another thing. And so there's a lot of principles that come up, and it's like, and so I get to share that I'm a believer. And by no means am I imposing anything, but like this is what the company's formed on, and this is how we're going to make decisions to the best of our ability. It's pretty risky, not risky, but there's tension there for me even to share that stuff, knowing I'm going to fail.
Right.
I'm going to fail representing the king, and I don't want to be part of um, all the. I believe nobody is opposed to Jesus that's ever experienced him truly. They're
Mm.
opposed to people that don't represent him well,
Yeah. Well,
right?
well said. Yeah. Well, because
And
for
I
many
don't
folks,
support that.
A Christian business means I'm going to put the fish, the ichthys, on the back of my truck, right? Or I'm gonna put it on my website. It's different, much different than what you're talking about here with a commitment to these principles. How does it work when it comes to your customers or your potential customers? I mean, this is something that Christian business owners struggle with a lot. First of all, how do you in this sifting process that you were talking about, how do you relate to folks that aren't believers? And then second, how do you, when you're talking about marketing and advertising, website development, these are things that get to the core of what your customers' businesses are, right? I mean, nobody's coming to you and saying, hey, I just need this light bulb fixed. When they're talking about marketing and advertising a website, these are core kind of components and infrastructure of every business. So how does that manifest itself?
Yeah, I think of Saint Francis of Assisi, and there's this quote that he was attributed to, and it says, "Preach the word of God every single day, and if necessary, use words." And
I
that's my
love
hope. Yeah, and that's my hope for my team. Most of my team does not believe what I believe,
that. Hmm.
and that's my hope for my clients, that my actions could actually impact them. And I was part of Young Life for a long time, and still in a limited capacity these days. But Young Life has this great um, principle where it's like you have to earn the right to speak into a kid's life. Like before you can talk to a kid about Jesus, you need to be walking with them. When I was a leader, I want to say it was 2 years. Now, if the kid opened the conversation full, go ahead. But
Hmm.
it was like a 2 year commitment before you could even like proactively. And I was like, that's serious, right?
Yeah.
So my hope is that actions give opportunity to let people know what I believe, both in clients and team. And then when it comes to how we're marketing, advertising, growing, there are certain things we will not touch, industries, clients, whatever that may be. So, uh, and they're more, we build apps and we do e-commerce sites and stuff. And as an example, somebody asked us to build this really complicated community app, and it was very expensive and very profitable for us. And they were just being a little vague, and I was like, is this for swinging? And they're like, well, it's like, and whatever. I was like, and I was able to just share, and I felt like this is actually a huge opportunity for the gospel, because like the worst thing I could do would be like shame it, because
Yeah.
I think like you don't know what you don't know, and until the veil came off my eyes, I didn't know. And so I actually spent probably more time praying about that one response than any other response of like, we're not going to work with them, but how do I glorify God and give someone an invitation um, into this, right? Versus like,
Yeah, just
um,
pushing them away.
yeah, shunning them and doing other things. So that would be an example. Is just there's certain industries and certain things that we won't touch, um, and I think my response to saying no is probably one of the most important things I do in those situations.
And so, in that regard, how do you say no? I mean, is it kind of like the classic breakup line? It's not you, it's me.
No, no, I like that. And some of it's like that one was different because I was down the path a bit of the way, so we had formed a little bit of a relationship. There's certain things where if somebody just is applying or sending a project inquiry in, like we don't have to we get tons of spam, like I don't even have to respond. So there's certain levels, but
Yeah.
if something was already going, it was definitely, I felt it was important to be honest and be able to say like, hey, I really appreciated getting to learn what you're doing. Like you seem like a great guy, and um, as a company, like we built our company on these things, and to my understanding, multiple relationships with promiscuity actually isn't for people's thriving in the long run, and sharing like from a believer standpoint. And so like this is just what I believe and my experience of what I've seen, and so we're not able to put our team's best behind something that I think is not for people's best in the long run.
Wow, that's beautifully said.
Um,
Okay.
and I don't remember exactly, but it was to be authentic and honest, again without shame though,
Yeah.
with like an invitation. Maybe for them to walk away and say, wow, like it's not because it's bad, like maybe this isn't for my best.
Right.
Like what does
Yeah.
it look like?
Yeah. All right. So we talked a little bit about at the outset that the kind of the commitment to tithing from day one. What we haven't talked about is what do you give to? I know that human trafficking and the prevention of human trafficking and ultimately the elimination of it is very important to you. So let's talk a little bit about that and then some other things that you like to support.
Yeah, that's the highest priority. We used to kind of support everything that came through our radar and our team's radar of things that we were interested in. And I don't know when it was, maybe 7 years ago. I think we realized that to have impact, it would be better for us to have depth instead of breadth, and so to get really focused. And so we put all of our stuff goes into trafficking, with the exception of missionaries and mostly missionaries that we had supported before we made that decision, that we just said we're not going to like cut off on that. So those are the two things. But I think there's no shortage of amazing things you can give to. And for me, for Never Settle, I just believe there's not um, a darker thing on the planet right now than what's going on with trafficking. So that's just where we've done it. But um, people need water, people need shelter, people like need education. Like um, there's no right answer of where. I think it's like, are we or are we not?
You and I talked about this a little bit a couple of weeks ago. Rebecca and I lived in Atlanta for 30 years, and that's where we raised our kids. Many of our listeners are from the Atlanta area, and it has unfortunately earned the notorious title of the human trafficking capital of the world. Do you give to a specific charity? Have you started your own charity? How does that work?
Yeah, I was involved with starting some, but for the most part, everything we do is to kind of get behind what other people are already doing,
Okay.
so we're not reinventing the wheel.
Okay.
And that used to look like pure cash, and then over time, it's the highest leverage point we've found, like dollar per value, if you will, is for us to leverage our team's talent into those things. So we have world class designers and world class marketers and world class engineers that can develop anything. And so with our partners, if they have a need in that space, we can make that money go so far.
Why? I see.
And they get to choose. So they're saying like we need this learning management platform to educate people for awareness, or um, we're just simple things like we need a new website. Like we need a website so we can capture donations or whatever that may be. So that's where we invest a lot more of our time
That's
or
awesome, Ken.
time. Sorry.
Well, and so having said that, we'll put in the show notes any of these charities that y'all have worked with. We'd love to see the example of the talents that you and your team have that are out there supporting this. I mean, basically, it's modern day slavery, and
Yeah.
it needs to stop. So
Yeah.
I'm thrilled that y'all are working on this, and we would love to connect listeners to go take a look at that kind of work and support those charities. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The two that we're probably most involved with are I Empathize and Rescue America, but I will definitely provide you with a list of some resources where people
Cool.
can find out how to get involved.
Well, as we wrap up our time together on a busy Friday in January, I need to go back to our signature question, which I think you've spent the last 45 minutes discussing. What does it mean to you to be a Christian capitalist?
Yeah, it means to to steward what God's given me, and I think about the parable of the talents, and um, they're each given a talent, and like were they able to multiply it? And it starts with thinking about what has He given me, and a lot of Christians talk about this, but like time, talent, money, but how am I stewarding those, and am I multiplying them? And I think as a I can't remember who said it, but they said business is the only um, economic generator of value. Everything else consumes. And so God's given me this unique opportunity to get an education, to live in America, to be passionate about business. And how am I stewarding that? And part of that is multiplying it, right?
Right.
And so for me, Christian capitalist starts with, am I faithful in the little, like the little bit that He's given me here on earth? So starting there. And then I think I touched on this before, but I just think one of the most important things in business is how am I taking care of my people? Like, am I impacting them, right?
Right.
And then as I am, what's crazy is the better they thrive, the better work they do, the more
Exactly.
profitable we are, right? And then we can give more cash or time away to other things. So
It all gets
that's
multiplied.
what it is.
I love it. Ken, thank you so much for your time today. We've really enjoyed hearing your stories and your experience and your lessons about how to run a business based on biblical principles. We sure do appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. We'll see you soon.